Getting out of the car, he looked up at the house, gazing back at him ominously. Slamming the door with a thud, he began to make his way toward the front door, slowly, surely. He reached out a trembling hand, and with it, knocked on the front door. I hope you found that opening effective. Moving on from last lesson where we planned our story, we're going to look today at how to write an effective opening. But as always, the first thing we have to do is our superhero spag. So we're looking for a pronoun in this sentence. Captain Marvel is a superhero. She is also a trained pilot. Remember, a pronoun is a word that can be used to replace a noun, so something instead of a person's name. So the pronoun in our sentence is she. Instead of repeating Captain Marvel in the second sentence, we've replaced it with the word she. There are other pronouns too, her, his, and so on, that you can use to replace nouns. Right, now a bit of a different task. This time I've given you a sentence without some punctuation. I'd like you to put the commas into this sentence. Green Arrow is versatile, clever, and brave. Where would the commas go in that sentence? Well, I've highlighted the commas in red. This is a list. It's listing adjectives that describe Green Arrow. So it should go, Green Arrow is versatile, comma, clever, comma, and brave. If we're listing, before that final adjective or before the final thing you're listing, you must have a connective word, like and. Again, punctuation, but I'm looking for a colon. I want the following items: batarangs, the Batmobile, and my grapple gun. Where would the colon go in that bit of speech? Well, I've circled the colon to make it really obvious, but it should go before the list starts. So after Batman says, I want the following items, we put a colon because then there is a list of items, and again with the commas used correctly. Okay, this time I'm going to read you a sentence, but it's got some spelling mistakes in it. You're going to need to look really closely at the sentences and see if you can spot those spelling mistakes. Let me read it. Thor saw his friends up ahead and waved to them. They were all packed onto a busy train. Where are the spelling mistakes there? Think about how they are spelt. If you know how to spell them, you can be ready to tell me. Hopefully you found the spelling mistakes. So friends ahead, waved. I've used the wrong type of word there. Packed and train were all spelled incorrectly. Friends is Friends. I before E except after C. Ahead has an EA in the centre. Waved, ED ending. Were, I'd actually put where in this sentence, so where someone is travelling to, but we wanted were, W-E-R-E. Packed has a K sound in it, and train, this would be Trian if you read it as it's spelt. Train, T-R-A-I-N. Well done on completing Superhero Spag Round 5. We're going to move on to look at openings now. So, moving on from last lesson, where we planned our story, we're now going to look at writing an effective opening to our story, how we can engage the reader, and how we can make sure that they want to read on. Firstly, we've got to think about what a story opening should do. It should grab your attention, it should leave you with some questions, make you think about what's going to happen later on in the plot. It should make you want to keep reading most of all. If you do these three things, it's called hooking the reader. It means that they aren't going to put your story down after reading the first section. They're going to want to read all of it to get all those answers. So last time, when we were planning our story, we looked at three types of opening: action, dialogue, and description. I'm going to show you three examples based on my short story plan from last time, which is still here. I've only included the setting, characters, and opening sections this time because that's all that's relevant to my story. Remember, mine was about a pirate ship and some characters that discover a deserted island in the middle of the sea. When I read out each example, you're going to tell me which type of opening it is. Is it action, dialogue, or description? You'll have to look for key things in each example which will tell you which type of opening it is. Let's have a look at them. Here's my first example. The sea glistened like a sparkling silver mirror. Waves lapped gently at the sides of the Royal Fortune as she sailed silently along in the cool, refreshing breeze, her Jolly Roger flag fluttering limply. Seagulls circled overhead, calling to each other. No one would guess what terrible adventure lay ahead for Captain Pegleg and his crew of daring pirates. Pause the video if you need to now, and just think, which type of opening is this example? Is it action, description, or dialogue? And why? Then let's get ready to hear the second example. Here's example 2 then. Land! I can see land! Sly Sam shouted, peering through his small monocular. He's right, Captain, confirmed Scarface Bill as he peered over the ship's long bow. In the distance they could see an island covered with overgrown, thick jungle. Let's set a course and mark anchor there then, boomed Captain Pegleg commandingly. Have a think. What type of opening is this? There's a key thing here that will make it easy for you to spot which type of opening it is. I'm not going to tell you yet. Let's have a look at example 3 first. Here's my third and final example then. Crash! The Royal Fortune scraped along the rocky beachfront as it careened toward the island. Rope, cannonballs, anything that was not tied down was bouncing around the deck. Captain Pegleg and his crew hung onto the mast for dear life as the ship wedged itself into the sand, finally stopping with a thundering crunch. Again, pause the video if you need to, and just think about the details of this example. What type of opening is this? You've had a chance now to look at all 3 examples, so let's go back over them and just make sure we identified them correctly and what makes them specifically a good opening. So my first example was, of course, a descriptive opening, or a description. You can see this in the sections that I've marked in green because they are describing aspects of the world around the characters, what the sea looks like using a simile, the way that the waves are lapping against the side of the boat, how she sails through the sea, and also what's happening. You can see I've used a lot of adjectives and also a lot of adverbs to describe actions. This really paints a picture in the head of the reader. Remember, if you've written a setting description already from one of our earlier lessons and you're using this in your story, you will have already learnt some of these techniques. If not, I suggest having a look at that lesson as well, as that would help you write a descriptive opening. So I'm sure you managed to identify that the second example was a dialogue opening. Obviously, the inverted commas are around the speech and the speech straight away, which brings your reader straight into the story through the characters talking to each other and also sets up the main plot. I've introduced that Sly Sam can see the land, it's confirmed by Scarface Bill, and then, of course, they're going to head over there because the captain's commanded that. Again, I've used different verbs and different adverbs to describe how the characters are speaking, which makes it a bit more interesting. You can see I've used shouted, confirmed, boomed, commandingly. These type of words paint a picture again of how the characters are speaking and the actions they're taking while talking, which is much more interesting than just using the word said, Captain Pegleg, for example. If you're going to write a dialogue introduction, I would advise using lots of verbs and adverbs to paint a picture in your reader's head. That leaves us with one final example. So the final example then, by process of elimination, was action. Obviously, this type of opening gets you straight into the main events of the story. I've used an onomatopoeic word to start, crash. So straight away, my reader's like, oh, something exciting's happening, because the Royal Fortune is scraping onto the rocky beachfront as it careens toward the island, as it sails toward the island. Lots of different chaotic things are happening. The rope, the cannonballs are bouncing around, the crew are already in a dangerous situation, and then again I've used onomatopoeia at the end of the example with a thundering crunch as the ship crashes onto the beach. So this is a good type of opening because it sets your reader on edge straight away, it creates a bit of tension already, and they are thrown straight into the action without having to set up anything else. Now that we've seen all 3 examples and had a chance to read through them and identify them, it's time for you to think about some of the ways that the openings drew you in. I've spoken about a few of them, but what was effective to you? From that, you could pick which opening was your favourite and which was your least, because this will then help you decide how you want to open your story. You might have thought that you want to open with dialogue, which is fine. All of these openings are effective in their own way. It depends what type of story you're telling. So there's a bit of independence now. You need to decide which one is your favourite, which one is your least favourite. Come back to the video once you've done that. Again, these are some of the ways that would have hooked the reader. You open with a question, dialogue, a description of a character or the setting, a dramatic statement, start in the middle of action, or leave the reader with questions that intrigue them. Any of these ways are effective in hooking the reader in your opening. You've had a chance to look at 3 different openings. Now's the time for you to choose your own. So you need to think back to the story you planned. What would be the most interesting way to open your story? Dialogue, action, or description? I'm going to give you 20 minutes. Have a go at writing a story opening that's suitable to your story. That means if you've chosen a different type of story, perhaps it's not so action-packed, perhaps it's more about the characters, then you might think dialogue's the more appropriate way to go, or description. It's up to you now. There is no right or wrong, it's just what's effective for your story. Have a go at writing your story opening. Try to hook the reader as best you can. Then, once you've had a go at writing, come back to the video. One little bit of self-assessment left to do before we finish today. Now, as you know, I always like to self-assess at the end of the lesson. So, read the opening to your story. See, did it hook the reader? Did it start with a question, start with dialogue, start with a description of the character or setting? Did it leave the reader with questions, or did it start in the middle of action? Obviously, you can't do all of these things necessarily in your opening, but as long as you've hooked the reader in some way, your opening will be effective. As always, you can comment your opening down in the comment section, and I can read it and see for myself if it's effective or not. Hopefully you're enjoying planning your story and writing your opening. I'm hoping in the next session we'll move on to writing the main event, so creating a bit of tension in our story. I hope you enjoy writing the opening to your story. In the next session we're going to look at how to create tension in the main events of the story. Remember, you can comment the opening down below in the comments if you'd like me to read it. Stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.